because in that era, nobody really took for granted that the brain is neuroplastic, that it can change. We take it that we're supposed to get old, get senile, and die. The reality is that with neuroplasticity today and techniques that we're going to share, they can learn how to keep their brain fit at any age, just like they keep their muscles fit. So I'm really encouraged by the adoption of brain fitness.
Welcome back to Unstoppable After 50, the podcast for men who refuse to slow down in the second half of life. My guest today is Dr. Patrick Porter, a world-renowned expert on brain fitness. Now, this is an area I think a lot of guys are not necessarily focusing on, but ought to. Patrick has a wealth of knowledge. He's written 10 books. He's developed some very unique technology called Brain Tap. And this idea of training our brain and maximizing our brain's fitness is critical in the second half of life. So stay tuned for an eye-opening and in-depth conversation with Dr. Patrick Porter. Dr. Porter, welcome to the show.
Hey, it's great to be here, Mike. Thank you.
Patrick, I was looking forward to this because your expertise, the technology you have developed, and what you're doing on a daily basis, I believe is critically important for everybody. We're going to talk about the importance as it relates to the guys over 50. But before we get into some of the solutions you developed and the things that you focus on, I'd love to get your perception and perceived misconceptions a lot of guys over 50 have about aging and brain health.
Right. Well, one thing is men seem to be gracefully aging, where women, they take a lot more into because they're thinking about their looks. Men are just thinking about how tough am I? Can I do what I need to do every day? They're not thinking about cognitive decline because it hits them too hard. And they're usually problem solvers in the first place. So they only start to recognize there's a problem if they're not able to solve that problem that's in front of them. So, but the reality is about brain fitness is just like muscles. Don't wait till they break down to have a breakthrough. You know, we can start training the brain today, and it doesn't take as much time as people think. The brain is a complex organ, of course. They say the most complex in the universe. But the reality is that to train the brain is very simple. You know, we just need to get them doing very specific techniques at specific times during the day, and they can upregulate their system and be thinking better. They don't take sleep. A lot of men think, hey, I don't have to sleep that much, you know, and they're proud of it. They're wearing it like a badge on their chest. But the reality is that sleep is the key for brain function. So the first thing I always tell people to fix before you take a supplement or get an injection or go even for hormonal therapy and all these things that people are doing now, the reality is that we need to get our sleep right because that regulates everything. And we'll kind of get into it if we need to, but during sleep, there's a system of the body that if you were in medical school in 2015, you wouldn't even learn about it. That they just found during a sleep study in Denmark, a doctor was doing the sleep study. He says, what is this? What's going on here? And he noticed that the brain hit something called the glial lymphatic system that only opens up in level 4 sleep. So if you're not getting good sleep, good level 4 sleep, you're not detoxing your brain. So that's the biggest decline that we see. Once we fix that, which we have techniques to do that, then everything else seems to come in line. You know, there's no ancient culture that keeps the wisdom of the tribe with the youngsters. They always keep them with the elders. So there must be something with our lifestyle that needs to change so we can get back to having our brain fit at any age. I mean, we've done studies with 90-year-olds and we've improved their brain function 19% in 6 weeks. So when you think about that, your brain is we use it like a muscle, but it's really neurons we're talking about in neuroplasticity.
And what I find so interesting, Patrick, with what you're doing, the technology you've developed, is that you're really focused on this area where, you know, a lot of the folks I have on this podcast, they're talking about diet, right? They're talking about lifting weights. They're talking about cardiovascular, all the things that I think a lot of people default to when it comes to health optimization. But brain fitness, and that's something that you discuss a lot on your articles and such, it really is part of that equation. And I got to believe it's equally, if not maybe more important. Thoughts on that?
Right. It is the most important. What good is it for you to have a muscular body if you don't have the cognition to use it? No muscle moves without your brain telling it so. No ligament moves, no bones move. Nothing happens until your brain says so. So it amazes me. Now, why does lifting weights work? Because your muscles are like a pharmacy. And so when you start to build muscle, you start to get all the interconnections at a chemical level. But let's begin at the beginning. We are electrical beings. It's called the electron transport chain. Whether they're lifting weights, taking nutrients, doing cognitive skills, it all turns to electricity, which means that we need to build up what's called ATP in the system. Now, how does that happen? It happens through the mitochondria. That's second generation. First generation is the electron transport chain. When every man watching this, and even if a woman sneaks in here and says, hey, what's my man over 50 doing? The reality is that as we age through something called neural pruning, when you were born, Mike, you were the smartest you're ever going to be. You have a 100 billion neural bit processor. Your brain was operating at 18.1 volts. In our studies, we show that dementia starts when that brain drops to 7 volts. If it drops to 4, you have Alzheimer's. What we showed in our studies in Florida was that we can increase that brain voltage in less than 6 weeks by doing some of the things we're going to talk about here today. And what happens once you get above 7, you no longer have that cognitive decline anymore. Now, most people are operating around 10.1 volts by the time they're 23, 24 years old, and it regulates there for the rest of their life. Now, when it starts to decline, of course, people say, oh, they're senile. But the reality is the brain is still there, just like the liver. A lot of people, they get cirrhosis of the liver. They go, you still have 25% of your liver. It's going to grow back. Well, we've shown in neuroscience proves this now that your brain can grow back too. We can't get those neurons that you lost during college or during your years of experimenting. But the reality is that our brain produces something called neurogenesis, which means we create new neurons for today, because your brain that you have today is not designed for the life we're living. When I was growing up, there wasn't even computer screens. So when you think about how life has evolved, no generation in history has had the technology advances that we have, but our brain hasn't changed. The neurochemistry of our brain hasn't changed. Our physiology hasn't changed. Now, back in the 70s, just so the listeners understand this, my school, the parents put a petition out to stop us from having weights in our weight room because there was evidence that proved that it stunted your growth. Now, this is insane, right? So we're in that same place right now with brain fitness. A lot of people think, I can't change my brain. And even though, like, if you went to Catholic school like I did, the Benedictine monk said, give me a child till they're 7, I'll give you a Catholic for life. Well, that's not really true anymore. We can change our thoughts. I'm not saying change your religion. I'm saying you can change your thoughts about things just because of your upbringing and what you were told. When my grandfather retired at 65, he expired at 66 because he didn't have a purpose. He didn't have a mission. He didn't have a reason for being. Now, if he had a big enough reason, a big enough why, his body would have kept going because they've proven that. Look at Mel Brooks. They're doing a special on him at 99 years old. The guy's still cognitive, still talking, still doing things because he had humor in his life. He didn't take anything too seriously. He overcame a lot of challenges. A lot of people think these people that are successful just stepped onto the gravy train and they made it. But one thing as a person over 50 they need to understand is they did an experiment, and they do a lot of experiments with mice. I don't know what kind of karma they're going to have at the end of the day, but they took these mice and they gave them everything they wanted. So a lot of people say, I just want a stress-free life. No, you don't. The experiment, they had mice and they gave them everything they needed. These mice had like luxury penthouse cages, and they didn't have to move to eat. They didn't have to move to drink. They'd clean up and they had perfect lighting, synchronization with the sun, everything. They gave them everything. Then they took another group of mice and they made the light change all the time. Their food they hid from them. They starved them. They did all sorts of different things to them just to stress them out. Guess which one lived twice as long? The stressed out ones. So over 50, don't pray to be stressless. Pray to build capacity. Now, it's said that we use only 10% of our brain. That's not true. We use 100% of our brain. We don't use 100% of its capacity. So we need to challenge that capacity, just like our muscles. And I'm a big believer in nutrition because, our foods are not very well anymore, and a lot of people are eating packaged foods. In fact, right now, I'm one of the guest brain experts on Fox News. So I get interviewed every day, at least 3 or 4 times by a different news company. And right now they're talking about foods. Our foods are designed for addiction with too much fat, too much sugar, and too much salt. Now, those 3 are really useful for the body, but in excess, they drive dopamine. So it's a brain problem at the end of the day. It's not a physiological problem. All stress is brain stress. I mean, we work a lot with special forces. Talk about stress. These people, life and death stress. And then they have to go back to an environment that's not stressful, but their brain has been patterned in what we call a reactionary mindset. So that's not good for everyday living. It's good when you're in war and you're trying to do something at a high level, but we need to be able to change our brain states. It's not one brain state that's better than another. I mean, I wouldn't want to take the Green Berets I'm working with and take that skill away from them. I want them to have the skill, though, when they're around their family and friends, that they're not on guard, sitting with their back against the wall, thinking somebody's going to attack them, and their body's in high stress. Because just like there's a saying, you're burning the candle at both ends, most people, unfortunately, wake up in the morning with the candle burning at both ends. And when they have that neurological dip at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, this is a physiological thing. You cannot outthink it. Your temperature drops 2 degrees. You're in sync with the sun. It's called the circadian rhythm. Now, most people will stimulate at that time. What you really need is a nap. Now, taking a nap is good, but nobody has 4 hours. So when we did our study with Google and Microsoft, what we did is we said at 2 o'clock, they said, how can we stop burnout? Because this is about the time people start to burn out. Hey, I've been doing this for 30 years. Why am I keep doing? It's not worth it. They don't have that same passion they had for their job or for their invocation. But the reality is they're just tired. Their energy is low. They don't have enough energy to have the same excitement about something, especially if they're entrepreneurial. So that middle of the day, what I told Google and Microsoft, because they came to me after COVID and they said, too many of our lead programmers are leaving. They're burned out. I said, they're burned out because they lack energy. They need to do a 20-minute brain tap session at 2 p.m. They said, oh, we can't do that. We can't take time out from our life. I said, give me 2 weeks. We will, because these programmers, we could measure keystrokes. We could measure their work output to almost the second. And what we showed is everyone that used BrainTap at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the average was 26% more work done in the afternoon. They actually got 1.25 days worth of work done by taking a 20-minute break. So just like Tom Brady, when people say, how did Tom Brady play football so long? He's one of the biggest advocates of BrainTap because he used BrainTap. His doctor got him using BrainTap to recover, and he's really big on recovery. So if you're working out, I actually wrote this in one of my good friends runs Muscle and Fitness magazine, and I wrote an article about acetylcholine. And it actually is, you have your own pharmacy. You don't have to use steroids and all that. We proved that you can improve your production of muscle by doing a 10-minute session after your workout, because it's something called BDNF. That workout is creating brain-derived neurotropic factors. So think of it as miracle growth for the brain. But what happens with that miracle growth for the brain, if you go right from working out back to your car, back to your stress, it all gets flushed out. But if you just take 10 minutes to let your brain reorganize around the stress you just put it under, the physiological stress, and you're really stressing your nervous system, which is a good thing. And when you're working out, it's a challenge, right? It's fun. And if it's not a challenge, you don't do it. Because also your mindset plays a big role here, especially over 50. If you look at life as a threat, your body is going to downregulate your DNA. This is proven in science. MIT proved it. Every 40 seconds, your DNA re-regulates. It either upregulates your DNA or downregulates it. So if you're looking at life, that life is happening to you, in other words, you get up, my boss doesn't like me, my job isn't good, and all these things, your body literally mirrors that. So when Henry Ford said, if you think you can or you think you can't, he was talking about neurophysiology. When you look at life as a challenge, wow, today, man, somebody's going to leave somebody just left my employment. What am I going to do? This is a challenge. How am I going to find a better person? Because that person left because they weren't good enough for the position you needed. You have to keep a whole different mindset. And so they proved that those people with a challenge mindset actually outlive. And when I say outlive, you want to be living to the fullest. We call it, it's health optimization, not longevity. If I'm only going to live 80 years or 100 years or 200 years, whatever it is, I want to have my faculties. I want to be strong. I want to play with my grandkids. I want to do the things I did when I was 30, and I can. I love it when my grandkids said, Grandpa, you're getting old. I said, let's go do a plank right now. I said, I'm only 64. Let's see how long. And I always beat them because I practice those planks. Now, think of this as a 50-year-old. You wake up in the morning, you're at the 100-yard dash line. The guy with the starter's there, and you go, hey, wait a minute, what am I doing here? And you ask the starter, he said, I didn't train for this. Well, everybody's part of the human race. It's not just a name. You are in a race for everything you do. You know what's going to happen to you tomorrow. Brain fitness says, let's plan for that. We call it neural priming. So to activate those skills, resources that you have latent inside of you. And I believe everyone has genius. And when you think about genius, it's not Einstein, even though he's one of my favorite characters in history. The reality is that the Romans had a saying that every one of us has a genie inside of us that handles our talents and skills. If we use that genie, we are called a genius. So you have to think about it. Everybody has talents and skills. If you ask me to fix your car, no way. But I have somebody that's a genius at car. They can listen to a car, tell you what's wrong with it. So think about that for a minute. You're going to participate in tomorrow's activities. Have you trained for it?
So Patrick, folks that are watching and listening to this podcast, guys, most of them are interested in optimizing their health, right? That's why they're coming here, for getting that information and those tips and ideas. I want to just clarify before we get into BrainTap, which you've mentioned, which is the technology you've developed. Is any guy sort of excluded from this? Like, can I say, hey, my blood pressure's good, my body fat's good, I sleep okay, yada, yada, yada. This is, if I start getting a little foggy as I get older, it just is aging. Is this something that is relevant to every guy?
Yes, that's why one of the books I'm writing is Getting Old Isn't for Sissies. I mean, that's a sissy saying, really. I mean, you're pretending the future isn't going to happen. Just because it's not happening now doesn't, that you go talk to somebody who has cognitive decline, and they said, wow, if I'd have known this 20 years ago, now you can. I want everyone on this call to go, after the call's done, after you listen to this podcast or YouTube video, whatever it is, go to your peanut butter jar in your pantry. If you can't smell peanut butter, you're 5 years away from dementia. That's a real easy tip. And so if you keep checking, now 5 years gives you enough time to maybe get back some of your capacity. But we've shown the earlier you start to work on brain fitness, the better. 30-year-olds are getting dementia today. 40-year-olds are getting Alzheimer's. When I was growing up in the 70s, I knew nobody that had these things. And that's because of the lifestyle we lived. When the farmers that were my family in Iowa would go to the fields, these guys are 80, 90 years old, still working out on the farm. They're playing cards at night. They're having great conversations. They're not thinking about retiring because who's going to run the farm? So you have to think about wherever you're at right now, that's where you're at. And you're listening to this podcast because this is the moment you're going to wake up your brain, because it doesn't matter where you're at. It doesn't matter where you think you're going. And maybe there'll be new technology. Maybe there'll be new insights about this. I hope there is, because this is an emerging field. But right now, I'm going to teach them. We can teach them some things they don't need BrainTap for. I mean, there are a lot of things you can do. They're not going to get you the same results as fast, but they're going to get you results. And I think it's important that we just start doing something to work on our brain function.
Well, why don't you give one quick example of that? But I do want to spend some time on BrainTap and how you've developed this, what it is, because it's fascinating. So why don't we give one practical tip for guys that they can start working on?
One practical tip that you can do for brain fitness. Every night when you sleep, your brain shrinks 3/4 of an inch. This is normal. It's part of the detox pathways. So just like a sponge, we're getting rid of those. The glia cells are being washed over by cerebrospinal fluid, and your brain shrinks because it's pushing out those toxins. In the morning, eliminate your coffee first thing in the morning. This is going to be the hardest thing for most people. You can still have it, but have it 2 hours later. Because when you wake up, I want you to drink a tall glass of water and put some mineralized salt. This is like Celtic salts or Himalayan salts. Put about 10 cranks of it or more into it, as much as you can stand, because your brain is like a battery. And just like if you go out to your battery and it's not working after 5 years because it has a 5-year warranty and 5 years and one day it goes bad, those cells in your brain need to be charged. Those salts are going to set the right pH. It's going to rehydrate your brain. Then do your workout. Because if you work out 20 minutes in the morning, that's like an hour at night. Because all the sugar in your system is in the muscles. While you were sleeping, your bloodstream used up all the circulating sugar. You have no sugar in your system. The worst thing you can do is have a cup of coffee. This triggers cortisol release, norepinephrine, and dopamine. The brain says, oh, you got that for me, Mike. I don't need to do that anymore. So the brain becomes lazy because the brain uses 20% of the energy of the whole system. So if it says, if you're going to do this chemically through a cup of coffee, I'm not going to do it. But we found that if you do it after 2 hours of being awake and it doesn't disrupt this, and it's called the cortisol trough, you should wake up a little nervous. Today's a new day. Statistically, it's shown that we know 97% about what's going to happen today. Only 3% should be a shock to you. So how have you planned that? In the morning, you want to plan by hydrating your brain, because most people, dehydration is their problem. They drink coffee all day, they drink soda pops, they never drink water. If you can start in the morning with that tall glass of water. Think of your weight. If you weigh 160 pounds, you need to drink 80 ounces of water today. Just to hydrate. Now, if you have a cup of coffee, that means you have to double that. So if you drink 8 ounces of coffee, you got to drink 16 ounces of water just to get your body back to because coffee is a diuretic. So you can drink it, but you have to then offset it. These are called health optimization steps. And there's a whole bunch of them in my book, the Brain Fitness Blueprint. But that's one that I say first thing in the morning, and then later I'll talk about some other ones that are just as important, that are easy to do. These are things, you don't have to go buy anything, you don't have to do anything, but you should be drinking good water. If you're one of those tough guys that thinks, oh, the government's out for my good and that water's got to be good, that water is terrible that you're drinking. They make it just good enough so it passes through. You need some kind of filtered water.
Yeah, that's a whole other. I had a guest expert about a year ago who wrote a book called Detoxify, a medical doctor, and it was probably one of the scariest books I've ever read. And it was a great book. It was a very powerful book. And the chapter on water, public water, et cetera, whole other. But I've been doing the Celtic water salt. I've been doing that for about a year now. I read it somewhere. It's just it's easy to do. I look forward to it now. I put a little squeeze of lemon in just to give it a little more.
Oh, that's even better.
Right.
You do that changes your pH. So that's great, and gets the detox pathways opened up. So that's even better.
Yeah. So Patrick, let's focus the conversation now on brain tap. And I want to take a step back because I want you to describe it, what it is, and why you developed this technology. And really, so let's go down. If someone's never heard of this,
okay,
I'll leave it in your capable hand to describe what it is that it does.
Yeah, Brain Tap is an app that they can just use with their own headphones, or an app with a headset that is specifically designed to increase brain productivity and performance. So how do we do that? First of all, sound is key. So we use sound that's been researched. They call it the Mozart effect. So what they found was when children were using this, and the adults too, they've done studies with adults now, but they really were focusing on children and learning. When you listen to this music, you're just smarter because your hemispheres synchronize. It's 10 hertz music. So that music is super important. So all of our sessions have some form of that, what we call 10 cycle music. This trains the brain. Now, what is brain entrainment so the listener understands that? You're being entrained all the time. Every cell of your body has something called a chromophore, and it has mirror neurons. That means your environment. MIT proved this, so I'm not asking anybody out there to believe me. This is science. You can keep your beliefs for Sunday. This is, when we talk about science, everything you're exposed to is changing your physiology, whether you are cognizant of it or not. Your body is changing based on the people you hang out with, the thoughts you think, the food you eat, the water you drink, all these things. And MIT proved it changes every 40 seconds. Like I said, it either upregulates because life is a challenge, or downregulates because it's a threat. So we're using music that puts your physiology in a safe place, because real change only happens when you recover. So we can't have you in a high stress state. So that music's there. Then we're going to use binaural beats and isochronic tones. This is a science of synchronization. So again, don't take my word for it. Go on to YouTube after you watch this one and put in synchronizing metronomes. You're going to see a guy that starts 200 metronomes at different times, and with 3 minutes, they're going to be synchronized. Now, it's not just metronomes that synchronize. Every cell of your body synchronizes. That's why when you're doing something you enjoy doing, something you love, you have all the energy in the world to do it. But when somebody asks you to do something you really don't want to do, you feel it's useless, you don't want to do it, your energy gets zapped because you're down regulating when you think about that event. We want to upregulate your life and have more peak performance moments. We got to get the brain to understand that. And it's how fast we can change it. And it has everything to do with brain waves. So I'm going to talk about those in just a minute, just real quickly so people understand it. These brain waves are happening all the time, but most people are stuck in a brain wave called delta. Delta is your sleeping state. We've measured 30,000 brains in the last 10 years with a piece of technology that I helped to invent called NeuroCheck. And almost 90% of the people we measure have a sleeping brain. meaning that they have to do coffee or sodas or whatever, sugar to stimulate their brain just to get it to work. We should have energy like we did when we were a kid. Our brain doesn't change. We should have that energy, get up in the morning, hit the ground running. Hey, man, this is a great day to make money, help people, whatever your internal voice tells you. But this doesn't happen in a delta brain. Your brain's saying, hey, stop, slow down, we need to heal. And you're not doing it. Now, nobody's going to just stop everything and work on their brain. So we got to do this in motion. So we use that. Now, what we did that no one had done before in 1986 with the company that I was the researcher on called Light and Sound Research, we started to use LEDs. Now, before that time, there were no commercially available LEDs. Now, why would we use LEDs? And every guy should understand this. You're on a date with somebody, or maybe you're with your wife, your significant other, and you're out at a cabin somewhere. You start a fire. And you just sit by the fire, you're relaxing. Well, that's because that fire is burning at 10 hertz frequency. It's alpha. And something called frequency following response, those cells match that fire. Now, what's magical for you men out there is that your brain starts to create oxytocin, acetylcholine, all of these things. These are like a date rape drug, unfortunately, because you're feeling all this love, this chemistry is going on, just like you did when you were a kid and you got all excited and giddy about doing something excited. When you're sitting next to that fire, that's because every brainwave triggers neurotransmitters. Now, there's 54 of them, so I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but just know that during sleep, as you go through that cycle of sleep, you're building up your neurotransmitter bank account. But most people have never done that. They're sleeping poorly. 2/3 of the world isn't sleeping. So if you're listening and you are that person that sleeps well, congratulations. The rest of you, you can be better than that SOB. You can train your brain to sleep, and then you're going to have better cognition, because every time you have a new thought, it creates an energy transfer in the brain. Those neurons begin to fire, and they wire around what they know. They're looking for a connection. That connection is only made if you have the neurotransmitters. Remember I said your temperature drops at 2? That means that it's normal to be tired at that time. You're not getting old. You're just recognizing how the body responds. And it's not just women that have cycles. Everything has a cycle to it. Just like if you have a motor, it has a cycle to it. Everything has a cycle. So what we did is we looked at light. We can't change a flickering flame. It's going to be 10 hertz. Whether it's a building on fire, a bonfire, or a candle, those all flicker at 10 hertz frequency. But we can take LEDs and we can lower them. And what we found was when we lowered those frequencies, we get people into a state of alpha and theta. And I won't go any further than that, but alpha and theta are your intuitive and your inventive mind. When you're awake, you should be 35% of your brain in alpha. It's the problem solver. It's your communication pathways. It's a lot more than that, but those are the key things for men over 40. And then theta is your inventive mind. When you face a problem in your life that you've never seen before, you don't have anybody you can call, these things happen to us. Our creative mind can help us through our intuitive brain, which is our theta brain. Most brains we scan, almost 100% have almost no theta. This means they're not making something called GABA. GABA is the most researched neurotransmitter right now because it's a pathway, it's the precursor to something called DMT. DMT, when it's released, creates nitric oxide, creates blood flow, circulation, all the things we need, not only in our brain, but in our body. The biggest problem we have with our body is our capillaries, not our bloodstream. It's crazy. They should be, everybody over 50 should go get their capillaries checked, because that's what happens, and I could go on and on about that, but it's not important here, but that's what niacin's for. And that's the supplement I think every person in the world should be on, but especially over 50. Niacin now starts slow because it has a flush, but it's going to open up those capillaries. Blood flow, circulation, and oxygen means health. So light can do this. You are truly, every cell of your body is like a light panel, like a solar panel. So when my dad, when he would give talks, because he was a Silva instructor, so I grew up going to lectures and things like that with him. He used to say, hey, if you're bald in front, you're a thinker. If you're bald in back, you're a lover. But if you're bald in front and back, you think you're a lover. And then there's the other t-shirt that says, hey, I'm not bald. It's a solar panel for a sex machine. Everybody has solar panels. This little chromophore, it's a little battery that sits in every cell. If that battery is charged, your mitochondria work. What MIT also proved, and it was just put out about 10 weeks ago, was they showed that the mitochondria actually produces codes. Now, we know that because my neurocheck, the Russians, my partners, they own the patent to HRV. And what they found out from the Cosmonaut program is your body is sending codes to every cell of your body. It's an instruction set, just like a computer program. And they showed that we pull that information from our sun, from light. And so it goes into the body absorbs that light energy, goes through the mitochondria, broadcast out, and we function at the highest level. If we don't have it, it's like a fire where we put dirty leaves over. So what light does is the hemoglobin in our body does this without light brain tap, but it does it every day if you can get out into the sun. But what we did with brain tap is we took the frequencies of sunrises and sunsets, and we put that frequency of light in 470 nanometer light. So this isn't like bright light. It's just enough to get what we call a cortical response, a response in the brain. What happens then is the brain starts to synchronize to it, just like that fireplace experience. But we can move the brain. So just like getting in shape, you can think about working out, and that's good, but it's not going to build muscle. That's why they say, prayer without action is dead. So you can pray about it, you can blame God about it or whatever, but the reality is you got to take action in your life. So what we're talking about is getting the brain to take action. So with light, sound, and vibration, because we use frequencies too, what happens is the brain starts to believe that it's not in this space, but in a safe place. And it creates a field of energy where you can start to visualize and realize your deepest dreams, because that's what we're designed to do. You're creating your future, whether you think you are or not, but most people are using what we call the default mode network. The Dalai Lama calls it the monkey mind, because that's the mind that you kind of argue with it. And that mind is your subconscious. And they say it's about like a fourth grader. So if you've ever argued with a fourth grader, you know who's going to win. So you want to just instruct your subconscious. 95% of who you are physiologically and who you are psychologically is ran by your subconscious, not your conscious mind. You're not thinking about your heartbeat, but it'll continue 86,000 times a day. So what we did is we designed a technology because we have a global problem today. It's not just you over 50 having this problem. It's happening all over the world, and more people are over 50 now than ever before. And it's only for a few more years, it's going to keep going. But one of the amazing things today, technology can be good and bad. This is the first generation in history that's dumber than our parents. I don't know if you know that, because technology makes them think they're smart because they have access to Google. They no longer remember information. They remember where it went to. So we always say, use technology for its betterment, but it can also be a downfall. It's not going to be, you still got to do the physiological work, like working out, eating nutritionally, drinking good water. And sleeping well. Those are all things we need to do. Brain tap becomes an assistant to doing that. And there's different brain waves to train at different times of the day. So it's not like just one size fits all. And one thing, I'm going to India here tomorrow because they just did a study with the largest mental hospital in the world, and we beat out neurofeedback. What they can do in 40 sessions, Brain Tap can do in 15 without a practitioner. So you can do this in the comfort of your own home. Your family can do it. It's one of those things that you can start it as young as you want. I mean, we have babies online, they're showing pictures of them using it, but they don't really need it till they're about 4 years old.
So Patrick, there was a lot of very high level information there. I want to bring it back down to the guy that's watching this or listening to this. And we talked earlier on about sleep. I think that's something that most of us could definitely optimize better. Can you just describe, because I want to give a clear, basic, practical description of how somebody would use Brain Tap, and let's say they want to focus on better sleep. Can you just describe what that looks like? And is it something I have to do the rest of my life, Patrick? What does that look like?
Well, if you don't have any stress in your life, you don't have to do it. Some people, it's just like anything else. How do you keep brushing your teeth? You do because you want teeth. Do you want a good brain? You got to do something. Now, you don't have to do Brain Tap the rest of your life. You have to do some kind of brain fitness the rest of your life, because just like your muscles, if you don't use them, you lose them. So let's talk about somebody that doesn't sleep well. First, if you don't have Brain Tap, you're okay. Here's what I want you to do, because you don't need Brain Tap to do this. Brain Tap is for people that want to accelerate their results and lead peak performance moments. But if you want to do the bare minimum tonight, when you're laying in bed, there's something called latency. If you measure your sleep, like on your Apple Watch or Aura or Whoop, or if you're one of those people that do that, this latency is how much time does it take from you hit the pillow to go to sleep? Most people brag, I hit the pillow and go to sleep. That's terrible for your brain. Because you need something called REM sleep, REM. In that first, if you can do an exercise for 15 minutes while you're in bed, after you've done everything else you want to do in bed, you're just laying there on your pillow. Nobody needs to know you're doing it. You're going to breathe into the count of 4, hold it for a moment, study, because you're going to turn on at that moment your sympathetic system. You're going to exercise your nervous system before you go to bed. And then you breathe out to the count of 8 and you scan your body and you release any stress and tension in your body. You keep doing that until you fall asleep. And what will happen is you will then start to sleep better, because if you go to sleep, let's say you're high stress, whatever, you hit the pillow, boom, you're asleep. You're going to wake up sometime during the night. And if you're waking up to go to pee because somebody told you after 50 you have to do that, that's not true. You have a circulating pump in your body. You should be able to drink a gallon of water, go to sleep until you want to wake up in the morning. You're not designed to wake up at 3 in the morning. You're waking up at 3 in the morning because between 2 and 3 o'clock, your temperature increases 2 degrees. And if your neurological system isn't working, it increases that temperature more. So you wake up with the sweats maybe, and you think you have to go to the bathroom. No, your nervous system is out of whack. So these are two times that I think people need to really focus on. So the first one with Brain Tap, we have sessions that you actually listen to that guide you and teach you these, not just this technique, but other techniques that you're learning to use without Brain Tap. So think of it as a training tool. And most people, 90% of our people listen right before they go to bed. Because what happens is the sessions are designed to put you into that deep delta sleep. We've shown in studies, the quicker we can get you to delta, not just asleep, not just passed out and not understanding where you're at, but get your brain to go through the cycle. Because it's all about the cycles of sleep, not about how long you're in bed. And by the way, studies show 6.5 hours of sleep is optimal, not 8. Now some people might need 8 and some people might need 5, so don't worry about how much time you're in bed. In our study we did with coal miners, the average coal miner spent 10 hours in bed before the study, but they only got 1 minute of deep sleep. They were the tiredest group. They had to drink coffee all day long to try to keep themselves going. But in 3 weeks, they were optimized sleepers. They were sleeping like Olympic champions because the brain can learn very quickly. So when you're going to sleep, use the headset. It takes you into delta. You will take the headset off when it's done. Now you've had that 15 to 20 minutes that you needed to train the brain. Now when you go to sleep, you're going to get deep rhythmic sleep that's going to cause you to create those neurotransmitters I was talking about. If you do wake up in the middle of the night, then until you train your brain again, you do another brain tap session, because we have to train the brain. Think of brain waves. We're going through sleep. It looks like this. We're in beta, we go into alpha and theta. We should stay in that alpha, theta, delta brain wave. But let's say like a balloon holding it underwater in a pool. When it comes out of the water, it's harder to push that beach ball back underwater. But once it's underwater, it's easy. We need to get that beach ball back under that beta line so you can be back in the alpha, theta rhythm in delta. And then the brain will figure out, hey, he doesn't want to wake up. He wants to stay sleeping. I never use an alarm clock. I haven't used an alarm clock since I was 12 years old. I have a 100 billion neurobit processor. It knows what time it is. All I need to do is program my brain. And I remember my son, when he got up, he goes, wow, does dad ever sleep? He's up when I go to sleep and he's up when I wake up. Because I got too much to do. I want the 36-hour day. I don't want a 12-hour day. There's too much to do in this world, too much fun to have, too much enjoyment. So when you're going to sleep, you should be planning that. If you're not doing it right now, remember, sleep is the time you incubate your superpowers. Every superhero had to go through the dark night of the soul. So don't worry about where you're at right now. That's only right now. Your body, Mike, when I'm speaking to you, I'm speaking to a body that's no more than 7 years old. Every cell of your body has changed. It's new, it's different. Even while we've been speaking, 50 million cells per second have been changing. You're not the same person. But people will bring their baggage with them. And I call it in my book, the dragons of the past, because people will drag them on and on and on. They'll say, well, in school, they said this about me. They said I'd never amount to nothing, all this negative thinking. Well, nobody has the right to tell you what to think. You want to improve your own thinking. So during that sleep cycle, that's what you do. Now, if you have the brain tap, we're going to recommend you wake up 10 minutes early and do it 10 minutes in the morning, because if you win your morning, and most people know this, if you wake up and you had that great night's sleep, you hit the ground running, it's great. And when you don't have that good night's sleep, it's like, oh no, shit, I got to do this again, whatever. But if you can reset the brain to SMR training, because what happens is so many people, their brain is so dysregulated, they don't wake up well. And they wait to see how they feel when they wake up. Why do that? You're the captain of the ship. Hey, everybody get on board. Your nervous system needs to be stimulated, so it's high alpha in the morning. And those two things, I mean, we've crushed every sleep study that we've ever done. That's why our app we got an award a couple years ago when we came out with Sleep RX, because I've never seen anybody not improve their sleep. It's just one of those. Now, there might be that one exception out there, but I've not seen them yet.
Wow. So Patrick, we only have the time to really kind of just touch on the surface of Brain Tap. And again, I found it fascinating, everything you're doing. You've got some great articles. So I'd highly encourage folks to go out and check. Where can people learn more about Brain Tap, and what is your and your books, because that's another key factor. And what should be a good first step if somebody's listening to this right now, guys listening to this, this sounds like brain fitness is something I really need to optimize. I appreciate the practical tips, but if I want to go to that next level.
Well, the next level is really getting better sleep. So start that 7-8 breath. 4-8 breath. So as you breathe it in, breathe out, that's a first step. And then do the water. I mean, once you start doing those things, your energy is going to change so much. Everything's an energy equation. We want to be around friends that raise our energy, we feel good with. We don't like to be around that downer that when you're with them, you're going, oh shit, I can't help that person out. They just want to talk about their problems. That's an energy exchange. So get your energy up. And then, of course, they can go to any bookstore or they can go online. They can see, I've written 10 books, but my newest book called Brain Fitness Blueprint, I have a 30-day plan in there. You follow that 30-day plan, you are going to have an optimized brain in 30 days. And then it's just going to get better, depending upon where you fall on the spectrum of brain function. And we've seen people that were in wheelchairs that couldn't walk. Once they started doing some of these things, they got out of their wheelchair and started walking, because we proved that balance isn't a physical thing. It's a mental thing. It's a brainwave called SMR. When you don't have that brainwave, you don't have balance. But once you get that brainwave back, your body knows your body doesn't do anything until the commander in chief, the brain, tells it what to do. So, and then I believe that everybody listening should take advantage of our 14-day free trial. Go to braintap.com. You start the trial. If it doesn't work for you in 14 days, just cancel it. You won't be charged anything. And the biggest thing I see is that people won't even challenge themselves, the ones that don't. But the people that do, you want to challenge yourself by doing that 14-day trial, because we've set up the sessions for you to do and to improve. And you can even try 3 sessions without putting in any name or even credit card or anything. So go there, try it out, because it's simpler than you think. It doesn't have to be so complex like man likes to take it. The brain is a complex organ, but to improve it isn't.
And to optimize that 14-day trial, Patrick, what is the recommendation? Is it twice a day? What is the commitment? 3 times a day?
3 times a day. And what you'll find is you'll wake up with more energy. Wake up 10 minutes before you usually do. Do the 10-minute SMR program. In the middle of the afternoon, or when you get off from work, if you can't do it right at 2 o'clock, do it before you're with your family and friends. See how your energy changes. They'll notice it. Now, and then do the one right before sleep. And you can use your own earbuds or earphones to do it. So what will happen is, if you track your sleep, 90% of people that take that trial have their best night's sleep during that 14 days.
Oh, okay. Very good.
So
it's braintap.com. All right. Well, Patrick, listen, this is very enlightening. You threw so much at us, both practical and a little bit higher level. But I would encourage everybody, check out his books, check out Brain Tap. And before we wrap up, Patrick, I always like to end on my Unstoppable After 50 trifecta. It's 3 quick questions, 3 quick answers. You've shared a lot, so this first question is going to be a bit redundant, but I'd like to, you've shared a lot of tips. But is there anything else, Patrick, you'd want to tell a guy over 50, whether it's focused on brain health or just in general, to really help him optimize his life?
Right. Think of your healthcare system that most people think is healthcare as sick care. You need to create your own healthcare. So I'll give you an example. 8 months ago, I was diagnosed, my PSA was almost 8. Now this happens to almost everybody over 50. They wanted to cut into me. I did the research. I don't want to function in life without a heart-on or go to the bathroom in my pants the rest of my life. And that happens more than not. And my medical doctor said, that rarely happens. I said, that's not what I read online. It happens more than it doesn't. So I read a book from a friend of mine from ASU that I knew before. He wrote a book called Uncommon Cold. And so every morning I do a cold plunge. That's why I said getting old isn't for sissies. I get into that cold plunge. I started out doing 10 minutes a day. You only need to do 2 minutes, but I'm a person, I don't like to lose. So he talked about in his book how he took his PSA from 9 to down below 1. His testosterone went to 10. They thought he was juicing. I started doing it 8 months ago. I'm now around just below 3. My testosterone has went up. I don't have to have any testosterone replacement, but I do a sauna and a cold plunge every morning. This strengthens my cellular activity, gets my body to work in unison, turns off my inflammation markers, which happen because when you have those aches and pains in your body, and turns on your nervous system so that those killer cells can keep all these terrible things we keep hearing about. We're designed for health and healing, but we have to trigger it. And I do that every morning. I mean, unless I'm traveling. Sometimes if I get a hotel room with a bathtub, I have a 5-gallon collapsible bucket I bring with me, and I do it in the bathtub because I've just noticed such a big change. But most people won't do it because they don't want to get in the cold water.
Right. What about one book you recommend every guy over 50 should read?
Right. Besides my book, I think they should read As a Man Thinketh. This is the book that changed my life. When my dad got help as an alcoholic, he changed the way he parented, and it was our blessing. What he did was when we got in trouble, we didn't go to our room and think about what we did. This is the worst thing you can do, and it's proven out in prisons. People, second, third time offenders are there because they go to prison to figure out how they can't get caught. That's not the solution. But if they read that book, As a Man Thinketh, and take it to heart, because it says what you think in your heart, you become. It's a very simple book. You could probably read it in 15 minutes. So it's not a difficult book, but that will change your mindset about who and what you are. You're greater than you've been led to believe. You just need to activate that higher level thinking.
Yeah, that's a timeless classic for sure. And finally, Patrick, what is your Unstoppable After 50 challenge for my audience? What's one simple thing they can go do right now to change this upcoming week?
I think what I said already is it. Get up in the morning, hydrate, put salt, and maybe put a little lemon in it if they want to go the extra step, which I think is great. I do that every morning. I have lemon in mine, but I feel if I give them too many things to do, they won't do anything. Remember, a little bit of something's better than a whole lot of nothing. So you have to just do something. Start there, and that way you'll have the hydration you need to think, and then give up coffee for that 2 hours. That's a challenge, because a lot of people think I can't function without coffee. Yes, you can. There was a whole group before the Indians convinced the English to drink coffee. It was used only for enemas. So it was a joke they played on them, and then they went back and made it a whole industry. So when you think about it, it was used for enema treatment to get toxins out in the ancient tribes. They didn't even know you could drink it. So.
Well, listen, Patrick, this has been eye-opening, enlightening, motivating. So again, thank you. I know, like you said, you've made this your life's mission to get this information out there and help not only guys, but just everybody, with this whole concept of brain fitness. So thank you very much. I truly appreciate your time.
Well, thanks for having me, Mike.
Well, that was quite an interview with Dr. Patrick Porter. I learned so much. Some of it went over my head, but it doesn't mean I don't want to learn more and investigate more about Brain Tap, about his books. This whole concept of brain fitness really resonates with me, and it's definitely something as I get older, it's something I need to focus more of my time and energy on. Now, listen, if you appreciate what I'm doing here at Unstoppable After 50, please subscribe to the podcast, check out the YouTube channel, subscribe there, and go to my website, unstoppableafter50.com. Sign up for my weekly playbook. Every week I send a downloadable PDF of the previous week's episode with my own commentary, my own insights that you can print off and save, and it's just a real nice encapsulation of that interview. So check out unstoppableafter50.com.